Arsen. How we doing, buddy?
Fantastic. I'm thinking about you, man. The legal eagle from Budapest. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Doing
All
great.
right. So what's going on in the fight world, buddy?
Oh man, a lot. It's big news, right? PFL and Bellator merger. It's very interesting news. It's very interesting news in the fight world. It's definitely an interesting thing because it's gonna be some bigger competition to the UFC now. Probably gonna cut like a few fighters who are not that high level, right, and just keep the better ones and kind of like mix all the divisions together. It's gonna be really interesting. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I got a couple of questions first because I'm thinking about this merger. Is it going to be like, are they completely without any way of return, just merging as one company? Do they change
Well,
their name, or is it like a one-time event, or what's happening? What's going on?
well, to be honest, I don't know actually. Do you know anything about it?
No, I just saw some posts popping up, man, about these two organizations teaming up.
Yeah, what I know is like that they're gonna mix the divisions together, so it's like they can make like champion versus champion fights and just general like mixing the divisions together is gonna be like a really interesting thing. Yeah, however, I'm still not I don't think I'm gonna be like a very, very big fan of PFL and Bellator, for one reason, because they don't allow the elbow strikes in PFL, and if they keep the same rule, it's just not gonna be like that exciting as a UFC fight, right? Because in UFC, I mean, if you look at the fight like Yuri Prochazka against Dominic Reyes, I mean, that was a fucking beautiful spinning elbow knockout. Also when Matt Brown knocked out Diego Sanchez, just catching his body kick and then just smashing his face with a brutal right elbow, right?
Wow, yeah.
So these things won't happen in these fights, so it kind of makes it a bit less interesting to me.
So Bellator, what I'm seeing now, like did PFL buy Bellator, and it says like during Thanksgiving week, PLF higher up issued a press release announcing the purchase of Bellator.
Right.
So then, literally, PFL, the organization PFL, have purchased Bellator. So I don't know if they're keeping the name or keeping it separate organization or just like choosing from one pool of fighters. I'm not sure how they're gonna organize that. But I remember, like, we have this one Norwegian fighter, Martin Hamlet. Have you heard about him?
I've not heard about him, no. Is he in
So,
Bellator or in PFL?
well, he was in the in the PFL. So he was fighting. How heavy is this guy? He's a heavyweight dude. Yeah, he's 93 kilos.
So he's like a light heavyweight, right?
Yeah. But he has in wrestling, he's from Norway, this guy, Martin Hamlet. I actually sparred with him a couple of times and knew him through the Olympic Center in Norway before. But he's been competing in the Norwegian national championships in like from a young age until now. I see like the last category was like 230 kilos, man. The category he was wrestling in. So he's like
130 kilos. Wow.
Yeah. And now he's currently at 93 kilos and top shape. And PFL had these tournaments, PLFL 1, 2, 3. And in the PFL 10, he was fighting he was fighting in the finals against this Antonio something from Brazil.
Right.
So he was able to, like, if he would able to do that, to win that final, because he was winning his fights during the tournament until the final, and then he unfortunately lost in the final against this Antonio Brazilian guy. But there was like $1 million on stake here for the first prize.
Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, I gotta give like respect to PFL because of this, because like in PFL, I think as a fighter, it's obviously not easy, but maybe it's a little bit easier to make serious money there than in the UFC, right? Because UFC, you can be like pretty high level, you know, you can be like ranked in the top 15 or something and still not make like, you know, very good money. You might make like, you know, 30, 40, 50K a fight, you know, plus the win bonus, obviously, but it's nowhere near like $1 million.
No,
So,
no,
whereas there
it's
is
a
this
good
guy,
point.
right, in PFL, like their light heavyweight champion. I think he's the light heavyweight champion. Yeah, Rob Wilkinson is an Australian guy, and he had two fights in the UFC before. One of them against Adesanya, and he lost it. He lost to Adesanya by knockout, and the previous fight also he lost in the UFC, and then he got cut from the UFC, right? And
No.
he then started training with Adesanya, went to PFL, and then became a champion there. So you know, it might be a better option as a fighter actually to be in PFL than in the UFC.
You know, as a fighter, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of discipline that you're originating from. You know, so if you're a Thai boxer, if you're a kickboxer, if you're just a straight up MMA fighter, just coming out of the modern MMA gyms, it doesn't matter that much. You know, at the end of the day, it's creating kind of a career path for the fighters where they can, you know, make some decent money. And any athletic career is short. You know, some injuries, some damage, whatever happens, you know, some mental challenges, you know, because life is hard, you know.
Yeah.
So I think the career is so short. So I kind of understand that athletes should, especially in this primitive sport, should be able to make some more money. And I'm happy that PFL has been doing that, like with these tournaments and this kind of way of fighting, because it creates this consistency for people to follow. Like if you're a soccer fan or a football fan, you know, you have your teams, you have your leagues, you have the games you can follow, you know, the seasons. With fighting, you know, you never know. Oh, this guy is a professional fight now. Oh, 6 months later, oh, it's another professional fight. You never know what's happened. There's no
Yeah.
consistency to it. So I think what PFL has done, they have kind of structured it more mainstream. I don't know about us taking away these elbow stuff, but let's see. You know, let's see. There's a lot of still creative things, way of fighting, but there's a reason why we watch MMA, man. There's a reason why we watch the highest leagues of mixed martial arts, because it has some power to it. You know, like all these kind of elbows, knees, you know, grappling, stand-ups, take the, you know, all of this. It's just the ultimate challenge for a human being to compete in, you know, this kind of setting.
Yeah,
But
I agree. I just
so
you know, just have this thought about it. Like, I mean, taking away the elbow strikes is like kind of, you know, taking away like one crucial element of a mixed martial art fight, right? So it's you know, I have like my issues with that. And yeah, I mean, I understand why PFL is doing it, because, you know, it's like less damage if you don't get like elbowed in the face, and then, you know, these fighters can go on and fight in these tournaments. So like that's the reason. But yeah, I mean, it's still, I prefer a fight where, you know, like everything's allowed. Like even in one championship, like even the soccer kicks to the head are allowed, you know, which is like fucking brutal, obviously. But, you know, if you're talking about like, you know, mixed martial arts, then I think everything should go, you know, other than, you know, obviously groin strikes and, you know, eye gouging and this kind of bullshit. But, you know, other than that, I think I prefer everything go, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a young man's game, you know, fighting. You know, I think that in the beginning you're like, there was also this athlete from Norway. He was competing in strongman championships. His name was Arild Haugen. This guy was incredible. You know, if you ever watch strongman, he has still the record of the stones. You know, lifting the stones. I don't know how many kilos, but like all the 5 stones within this amount of time, he still has the world record in that. You know, it was incredible. And I remember he was saying like, I'd rather die knowing I became the world champion than never become the world champion again. And he was using like creams that, you know, to warm up his muscles that were designed for horses. You know, it was extreme. It was extreme. And I think if you expose young men to a sport that has all this kind of money in it, that has all this kind of fame, all this adrenaline, you know, all what young men are attracted to, you know, they will put their life on the line. So I'm thinking in hindsight, after a amateur career in martial arts, I'm thinking about maybe it's a good thing, you know. You don't see a lot of 45-year-old Thai fighters still competing, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not a sustainable way to live your life, and I don't know. For the fighting of it, no, of course not. Elbows should be allowed. What would John Jones be without not being allowed to use his elbows,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That guy just is made out of 17 elbows and 14 knees. That, you know, the guy is, you don't
Yeah,
know where it's
yeah.
coming from, right? So
Yeah, I mean,
of
but
course,
just to make like a quick like counterpoint to this, you know, what you just mentioned is like, yeah, I think elbow strikes obviously are a lot more damaging than, you know, just normal fist fights, strikes with the gloves and stuff like that. But I think MMA is still a lot safer than boxing, right? Like I think boxing is like the worst in terms of long-term health, right? Because like if you think about it, boxers, they get punched in the face like 90% of the time, and then maybe 10% goes to the body. You know, the number might not be exactly correct, but you get my point, right? And in MMA, right, there is like wrestling, there is, you know, jiu-jitsu, there is leg kicks, you know, there are like many body kicks and stuff like that involved. So a lot less strikes actually go to the brain. So I think when it comes to like long-term health and serious health consequences, then I think MMA is way safer, even when we leave the elbow strikes in MMA.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. You know, when it comes to elbows and knees, especially elbows, we're talking about cuts. We're not talking directly about knockouts, but just they're cutting people up,
Yeah.
making serious facial damages. You know, you don't use your elbow to the body and cut up his abdominal muscles. You know, so it's elbows to the skull. You know,
Yeah.
so
So basically, elbows just make you more ugly, but
yeah,
but not cause brain damage, right?
yeah. So, but there are brutal knockouts with elbow, especially from the Thai boxing world. You know, there's that's been also been used in the MMA world. So when it comes to brain damage, I think that we have some responsibility to take care of the fighters as well. You know.
Yeah.
It's the old saying: if you close one door, another door opens, right? If you lose one opportunity, you will be. If you lose one sense, if you lose your hearing, you're more dependent on your vision, and you will be more concentrated in using that better than you're using before. If you lose your vision, your hearing will improve. You know. And I was thinking about the same thing for MMA. If we take away the elbows, will we be more creative in other ways of winning a fight? You know.
You know, that's a very interesting question. It's a very interesting question, and yeah, the answer to that should be yes,
Yeah, it should
because
be, right?
obviously, if you, yeah, I mean, just go with the example, like a boxer, you know, like just a simple boxer. So he's gonna be like way better at boxing than an MMA fighter, right? Because he focuses on that, like whatever, from age of 12, and when he gets professional, let's say age of 20, so he 8 years in his life already practicing only boxing. And let's say when he gets to 30, it's almost 20 years in his life only in one discipline, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna be better, but yeah. So yeah, I would say that they should get creative in other ways then.
I think, if you look at other areas to make some comparisons, let's say languages. If you are a bilingual person, if you're able to speak two languages proficiently, then I would say that, okay, you're not a special person. But if you're working three languages, science has determined that your head, your mind, your brain functions differently. It's like comparing it to the left hand versus the right hand when you're doing, cognitive abilities versus creativity abilities. Science shows that if you are drawing more with your left hand, you're probably more creative person than if you're using your right hand, right? So if you try to compare it this way, I think the way that this can play out is that we will only improve the sport. I don't know if it's as much as entertaining, because for a lot of people, fighting is primitive. You know, they only see. It's like when people are commenting on a soccer game. Oh, they're just kicking a ball. Jesus Christ! You know,
Yeah.
you don't know the formations. You don't know the tact. You know, you don't know the positions of the player.
Yeah.
It's
I
it's
mean,
so
you know, like
primitive point of
what you're
view.
saying is basically right. Like everything looks easy from the outside, you know,
Yeah,
like, you know, it could be MMA, it could be boxing. Like boxing looks fucking easy from the outside, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's just, you know, two guys kind of dancing around in the ring, you know, hitting each other. But like get in there for just for 1 minute, you know, with even like a semi-professional boxer, you know, and you will suffer like a motherfucker. Like
yeah,
if
yeah.
you're untrained, I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And you see, like the game of the MMA world, if you're talking about fighting, this is extremely more challenging. If you look at Tyson Fury from boxing versus Francis Ngannou, who's more athletic?
I would say Ngannou.
Yeah, like physically, he can almost go into any sports, you know. And he
Yeah.
did. He went from MMA to boxing
Yeah.
to now
Yeah.
throw him
However,
in.
like Fury is very tricky as well. I mean, I think he has this looks, you know, that can fool you, you know, because he's like a bit chubby, you know, like not like an athletic guy like Francis Ngannou, you know, he doesn't have the looks like, you know, fucking Yoel Romero or someone. But I mean, he's still like very athletic and he has fast hands, you know, he's very flexible, moves like a fucking welterweight, right?
Yeah,
So
it's crazy.
he's a very interesting athlete.
That's true, but when it comes down to it, you know, I think based on statistics, a person with genetics and the ability of Francis Ngannou will easier adapt to any other sport, right? Which I'm trying to make my point here. In MMA has forced fighting athletes, whatever sport you come from, wrestling or karate or boxing or whatever, right? You have to be more flexible. You have to more your what do you call it? Like your repertoire needs to be bigger. You need to be wrestling. You need to be grappling. You need to be Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You need to be striking. You need to be offensive, defensive. You know, you have to have all these kind of the flexibility. You need to be better. You know, so the sport has developed the athletes in a much more positive way in terms of athleticism. So they've been much more all round as a fighter, as an athlete, right? And maybe this is kind of forces them the same way and avoiding the elbows. But it would be interesting to see like what are they basing it on? If you're going to take away cuts, if you're going to take away brain damage, or if you're going to take away concussions, well, then we're not allowed to hit against the head anymore. You know, like what do we do? Like what are PFL and Bellator basing on taking away the elbows?
I think it's because of the cuts, you know. I think it's because of the cuts, so that, you know, like you don't get like a massive cut from an elbow on your, you know, your forehead or your face or whatever, and then, you know, you're able to go on these tournaments like in a lot shorter time, right? Because like some cuts can take a long time to heal, you know, perfectly heal. I mean, so that it don't open up again, you know, after like one punch.
Brother, do you remember that video I sent you about one of these Russian fighters that was fighting in the full contact league of karate combat?
I actually don't remember this particular fighter. What about him?
He had stitches all over his head.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. He had like there was like a fraction in his skull, so they had to like cut his head open and fold the skin and make the fraction okay again and put the skin back on and fucking stitch. So his head was literally like half of his head was stitched together.
It's fucking crazy, man. Did he
Yeah.
have a lot of fights?
Well, yeah, he was a tremendous fighter, but you know, like he was just really unlucky getting this fracture in the skull of the head. I think it was above the eye socket or something, you know. So it's very difficult to kind of operate it without opening half your face. You don't want a scar in front of your forehead, right? So like,
how did he suffer like so much damage? Was it like because of the elbows?
It was just one. It was just one from one fight. It was let me see, karate combat. Head injury. Oh yeah. Wow, motherfucker. Oof. Let me see if I can share this one. For every viewer who's looking at this now, it's very sensitive content, to be aware that this is sensitive.
You should put the circle, with the number 18 in it, the red circle.
Yeah, like 18-year-old. Are you seeing it now?
Yeah. Ah, man, that looks nasty. That looks fucking nasty. Wow. Looks like the guy had like a big fucking car accident or something.
Yeah, this is also one fight.
That's fucking insane. It's fucking insane. I mean, and then you have fighters like Khabib, right, who had like fucking 29 fights and basically didn't suffer a single cut in any of his fights. But
you have race car drivers who are like crashing the cars and obliterating their vehicles, but they don't even have a scratch. So of course, you're just really unlucky. And then you just walk outside and put in the car, go to the supermarket, and you get killed. It's just super unlucky.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the one of the most brutal injuries that I've seen in MMA fight is Michael Page, from Bellator. Like, I think he's going to
Page,
Michael Venom Page. Yeah, I think he's going to UFC now. But yeah, like he had a fight against his name is Cyborg. I'm not sure what's his full name, but his name's Cyborg, like a Brazilian dude. And I think the Brazilian dude, he was going for the takedown, right? And Michael Page just put up a flying knee and basically broke his fucking forehead. He had an actual hole in his forehead. And that was nasty. That was like,
I think I've seen that one.
Nasty injury like the one that you just showed me.
Yeah. No, that's even this was just full contact karate. So so you shouldn't be able to get these kind of injuries. But be at the wrong time, at the wrong place, at the wrong situation, with the wrong technique. These things can happen. It reminds us like it's not a basketball game, man. You're putting your life on the risk here. Literally.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
I've seen people on skateboarding accidents never had this head injury like I just showed you. So
yeah.
So I think zooming out, looking at the big picture here, I think it's good that the top organizations are focusing on developing a rule set that kind of takes care of the athletes, because they're young, impressionate young men and women that have a lot to gain from winning fights financially, emotionally, in the material world. So I think it's good for some regulations. If it is as exciting as it is now, I don't know, but let's see. I like that they are having this mentality of kind of trying to do that. Another thing I want to ask you is, like, when you think about the Bellator and the PFL and the UFC and the Cage Warriors and all these organizations, how do you view them?
In what way?
Would you differentiate anything, like with the levels of it? Is all at the same level, or what do you think about these kind of Bellator?
I mean, yeah, like my view is that like UFC is above all of these. Like UFC is above Bellator and PFL, and both PFL and Bellator, they are above Cage Warriors. I think Cage Warriors is a bit lower than them. But there is one organization. There is this organization in Russia called ACA, and I would put them like probably almost the same level as UFC.
Okay.
Maybe even the same level. That's the organization. Their organization is from Chechnya, actually, in Russia. And many times, like, UFC fighters go there, like, once they get cut from the UFC or they leave the UFC for some reason, and they go to this organization, and like most of the time they just fucking lose. And it's like, we could make the argument, right, that these are maybe not the best UFC fighters, and that's why they leave the UFC. But then again, like these guys have wins in the UFC, but then they meet these dudes, like from Dagestan and Chechnya with a fucking record of 14-0 and 18-1, and then they just lose, so it's like I would put them on the same level as the UFC and not Bellator and PFL.
Because I'm looking at like how many professional MMA leagues are there, and there was like some sort of a ranking where you have UFC championships at the top, you have the PFL at the second, one championship at the third, Bellator at the fourth, Rizin Fighting Federation, KSW, Cage Warriors, and the last one is Invicta Fighting Championship. So yeah, I think that ACA is at the 5th place. But then again, if you're looking at the big pictures that I like to zoom out and look about sometimes is that when you're talking Chechen, fighters, okay, they're brutal. Warriors, brutal. Country, philosophy, ethics. It's probably not the country you want to move to raising up your children, So keeping that in mind, even Israel.
It's a very interesting question, because I think they have a lot of values that are better than in the Western world, right? So we could go into it. It would be like a long topic to discuss this, but obviously I think every culture, right, like has positive and negatives, So I think it's, like whether you would want to raise your children there and stuff like that, obviously it depends like a lot on your personal values and stuff like that. So let's say if there's a guy, who likes to go to the bar to get drunk and then, get some cocaine and fuck some hookers, then obviously it's not the place for him, right? But if you
Adam, don't bring your friends into this conversation now. Let them be.
Yeah. So, but obviously, if you're a guy who, I don't know, like a Muslim guy who just likes to go to the mosque and pray, and imagine someone like Habib, right? So for him, I think that place is way better than living anywhere in the West.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I want to raise my kids in the US either, so I'm not saying that they have the best system, but in any situation where it's like kind of turbulent, like Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia, I think that when the nation is, well, I'm kind of biting myself in the tail here, because US has been, like, UFC is in the States, and they've been fighting constantly for the last couple of 100 years with everybody, so that that's not a good value system either. But I don't know, just the feeling around Chechen fighters in that area, and I don't know too much about it. We see some Chimaev, you see these kind of fighters, but then again, not too much. They're very, I imagine that being as brutal or even more brutal in that world than the US. But
yeah, I mean, I know a guy. He went to the Soviet military. Actually, it was like still Soviet Union that time, and he served his time with Chechens there. I mean, there were like Chechens and Dagestanis in the Soviet military, and like he told me that these guys are just fucking fair. Just very correct. If you don't hurt them, if you don't like, talk bad about them, if you be fair to them, then they are like fair to you. So they are like not animals, basically. So
no, of course not.
but obviously they are tough people, So he told me a story, like one time, like a military person just kicked, like a Russian military person kicked this Chechen guy from the back for like no reason, and then they just fucking jumped into this guy like two brothers and just fucking kicked his ass in like 3 seconds or something. So it's like you shouldn't really fuck with them, but I mean, I don't think that they are bad people personally.
Yeah, it's like rank doesn't mean anything. If you overstep your boundaries, rank doesn't mean anything in the military.
Yeah, exactly. Like fuck around and find out, right?
No, I completely agree. And the value system that we have in the Western world, I'm not too happy about it either. You know, this LGBTQRSTP movement, you know, this kind of pronouns. You
Just
can
make
choose or
sure that we don't
everything.
get canceled, right?
I don't give a shit if that's a reason for canceling. Let's let it be. But
Yeah,
I think, you know, these values that are pushed upon the Western world from the minority. You know, even the guys who are you know, have different sexualities or have different identities. Even they don't know how many letters that there are now. You know, they don't know how many genders there are. So when it comes down to it, living in this kind of world where you're trying to enforce that children are not allowed to have tattoos until they're 16 or 18, but they're allowed to have beta blockers and puberty blockers at the age of 11 and change their own gender and utilize their own their own, you know, sexual, you know, biological sex. So these are also things that are despicable in the Western world. So I completely agree. And so there's a discussion to be had. You know, I see a lot of good things happening, like in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and also bad things. But there are some value sets there when it comes to taking care of citizens, when it comes to taking care of public health. But again, I think money rules the world. So it's kind of hard to say like which place is the best and which kind of mentality is the best. So, but based on that, I want to get back to talking about PFL and the Bellator. So, what do we think is going to happen now then with the tournament? They're going to keep calling it Bellator and PFL. Do you think that's?
Well, actually, I have no idea. Actually, I have no idea what they're going to name it now. But yeah, I think it's like really a minor question. You know, like what I'm curious about is really like how it's gonna play out. You know, like how you know, which fighters they're gonna keep, which fighters they're gonna, you know, cut, which fighters they're gonna sign. You know, and also like I would be curious to see like the numbers, how they do compared to the UFC like a year from now or something. You know, like are their numbers like any better than it was before compared to the UFC's numbers? So you know, it's gonna be really interesting to see that, you know, if it's gonna be like a real competition to the UFC. I mean, for the PFL, obviously signing Francis Ngannou is like a big fucking thing, right? Because he's like one of the biggest names in the sport. If they could do it with like one or two more fighters with the same caliber, you know, I'm talking about someone like John Jones or I don't know, like Alex Volkanovski or someone like that, you know, then it could be like probably a real competition to the UFC.
If the PFL could convince Khabib to come back to the sport and sign him in PFL,
that would be insane.
wow. Yeah, it's crazy. No, I think that's an exciting time to see what that merge has in store for us. What's going to happen in the fighting world? How they're going to choose the adjustment of the rule set with elbows and all of this. You know, one of the commentators also in the Karate Combat was Bas Rutten. So he's been you know Bas Rutten?
I know him, yeah.
So he was fighting this tournament called Pancrase. You know this one?
I don't know that, no.
So there was a lot of fights that he had in Japan, you know, but with Westerns and Asian and Japanese people too. But Pancrase was just, they had these kind of speedos, wrestling speedos, and then they could have knee protection and groin protection and mouthpiece, I guess. But they didn't have any gloves. But it was not bare knuckle because Pancrase was open hands, so they could slap each other with the inside, like the palm of their hand, like they can like punch like this and hit on the side.
But you were not allowed to make a fist.
Yes.
Wow.
And it was more about protecting the knuckles of your own. You know, there's a reason why we wear gloves. It's not protection of the other guy's head; it's protection of your own knuckles.
Yeah. Yeah, but otherwise it was what, like MMA rules or?
Yeah, they had yeah.
That's very interesting.
An
That's very
earlier version
interesting.
of the MMA game. So
However, I think
maybe
this is
it's a cyclist that we're returning back to something, you know.
right. This is
Yeah.
kind of a weird idea though, because that's like that goes against like the natural instinct of fighting, right? Because like throughout history, like nowhere humans fought with their hands open, right? I mean,
Dude,
it's like not natural.
I I've sent a couple of guys back to their childhood with a flat hand, you know. You're raising that pimp hand and just sending them back to their childhood. You know, it's more of a correction than it's a physical correction. It's more of a mental, emotional correction when you get bitch slapped literally with your
Yeah.
hand. You know, because you're like,
Yeah.
are we gonna fight or we're not gonna fight? What is he doing? Why did he
It's
hit
like when
me
you
like
want to
that?
you want to put someone to his place, right? And you should use like the just like a fucking slap. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
but
kind
it's
of
like, okay, when it comes down to like a real fighting, I mean, you know, I cannot imagine myself fighting with like open hands, like, you know, like slapping people, unless I'm fighting someone like, you know, significantly, you know, weaker than me or something, because then, okay, then you can do like whatever you want, right? Most likely just grab the person and hold him down or something. But yeah, you can in that way, like, you know, I would probably like fuck around and, you know, just use my, you know, slapping and shit like that. But I mean, in a real fight, like, would you fight with your hands open? Like,
hey, let's ask Nate Diaz about this question. He's been slapping people's faces for decades, man. Open hands, bitch slapping them, laughing, pointing, slapping them again. That's Conor McGregor. That's everybody who's been fighting. He's been bitch
That's
slapping
really
them.
funny with Nate Diaz. I think he didn't slap Masvidal though when they fought, you know, because I think he only slaps the guys that he don't fully respect, you know. So and it's not a lot of guys that he respects fully. So he slaps them, but you know, like when he fought Masvidal, he didn't slap him. So like when he genuinely like respects a guy 100%, that he doesn't slap him. So
okay, yeah, it's interesting. No, I think, you know, going back to these things where we're taking care of the athletes more, making it most sustainable for their bodies, for the sport. You know, it might not be as dramatic finishes and bloody and, you know, so Hollywoodish, but it will still create a lot of good fights and hopefully reduce the injuries, especially long-term injuries. And I think, you know, having more professional organizations will only improve the sport. That's my take on it.
yeah,
So let's see what it has to offer. Okay, that's all we had time for today, Mr. Adam, the legal eagle from Budapest. So I'm looking forward to our next talk, man. And meanwhile,
me too.
Stay healthy and happy, buddy.
Yeah, most definitely. That's what we aim for, right?
All right. Take care, buddy. Ciao.
All right. Take care.